I'm going to use the microphone, and if we squeal, I'll put it away. I don't have a super loud voice, so thank you all for coming. I'm excited that you would give up a sunny afternoon to talk about food, but I appreciate it. It's an honor. I always like talking about nutrition. So hopefully everybody got some handouts. We've got lots of yummy recipes to try that are easy and simple. A healthy kitchen checklist, which I'll be referring to a lot during the presentation. Really, it's called the anatomy of a healthy kitchen. So before you can have a stocked healthy kitchen, it helps to understand what a healthy meal is. I think a lot of this will probably be review, and hopefully you'll have a few new pieces of information to go out and experiment with. At the end, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite kitchen gadgets that I've brought with me, and some tips that I've learned along the way from other people who have shared with me that are time savers, tasty, low fat, low sugar options. So I'm going to start off with a question. This isn't fair because you have the handout in front of you, so you can see the answer, and it's a joke. What is a balanced meal? Often, the favorite joke here is a donut in each hand, or a cookie in both hands to have good balance. Obviously, unfortunately, that's not the case. We know that's not going to be balanced. So who here is familiar with the Choose My Plate graphic? Raise your hand if you've seen that before. Okay, so quite a few of you. And how about the old pyramid graphic? Okay, great. Well, this is the replacement of the pyramid, and I really like it because it puts food into the context of which we think of it on a plate versus on a pyramid. And it also, as it was designed, they really put a lot of thought into 4 really important nutrients. And following this idea of the plate actually gives you a balance of protein, carbs, fat, and fiber. And that's really important in a healthy meal because when you get the right combination going on in a meal, you control your blood glucose levels, you have more energy, you feel full longer, and some other good side effects. So I want to just quickly break down the quadrants of the plate. And as we go through these, I'll be pointing out the healthy choices that are also on that healthy kitchen checklist. Protein is my favorite topic, so I'm going to start there because carbs and fats all get a lot of press. You hear about carbs, you hear about fat. We don't hear about protein as often, but it is actually equally important. Some really important functions. It keeps your muscles strong. Your whole immune system is made up of protein, so it keeps you healthy. And as I was saying, when you eat protein with a meal, it helps to balance out your blood glucose levels. What it does is it slows digestion, so you feel full longer. You can kind of think of a breakfast. If you've ever had a really sugary cereal with milk, and an hour later you're starving, there's no protein in it. There's very little protein in the milk. You eat eggs and bacon, nice piece of bacon and some biscuits and gravy. Holds you over for a long time. That's got some protein in it, but it's got a lot of fat too, so there's some ways you can lighten that up. But this is important because the latest research with protein suggests that we need about 20 to 30 grams of protein at every meal 3 times a day. And let's put that into context because those numbers just don't always make sense to everybody. So a half a cup of cottage cheese is 15 grams of protein. A 4-ounce piece of meat is 30 grams of protein. These new Greek yogurts are 15 to 20 grams of protein in a Greek yogurt. So it's not a lot, but if you eat that consistently at every meal, you're giving your body what it needs. What happens is if you eat less than that, and this is kind of interesting, if you eat less than that, your body borrows protein from your muscles. So your body's breaking down muscle if you're not eating enough protein. And that's important because the more muscle you have, the better metabolism you have, which means you burn more calories. So protein at every meal is really important. And we seem to know that there's a stop point. 30 grams is about the maximum that your body will use to repair and rebuild. So over 30 grams at a meal, you go out to a steakhouse and you get a 12-ounce steak. It's about 3 times the amount you need. And so the rest gets converted to fat and stored. Or if you don't have enough calories, you do use it as energy. So some proteins are obviously better than others. I talked about bacon and biscuits and gravy, and that was jokingly. Those would be, probably the less healthy options. Healthier protein options to keep in your kitchen, keep in your refrigerator and your freezer. Obviously, boneless, skinless chicken and turkey breast, the new non-fat Greek yogurts that are high protein, low-fat cottage cheeses. Our milk products do have protein, so sticking with the skim and non-fat. Eggs are a good source of protein as well. Also for plant-based, you've got soy, tofu, soybeans. Quinoa is a complete protein. It's a grain, but it's a great protein-packed grain. And beans and lentils also have a good amount of protein. So these are some examples of proteins you might want to keep stocked in the kitchen.
I have heard that you have to combine beans with rice. Is that really true or not?
It's kind of true. I think we combine beans with rice in that idea of a balanced meal because they taste good together, but to get the protein benefits, so beans are high in certain proteins and grains have some of the proteins that the beans are missing. So if you eat both types in the same day, then you get enough of the proteins that you need to be a complete protein. But you don't have to eat them at the same meal. Good question.
Is quinoa a protein and a grain?
Yeah, it's a high protein grain. All grains have a little bit of protein. That just happens to be one that's special. It's a seed. So it kind of has lots of different names. Okay, so the next quadrant of the plate is what they refer to as grains. I like to call it starches because grains are somewhat limiting and it would, suggest you should only eat grains with your meals, but potatoes, yams, butternut squash, those are all great carbohydrate sources. And really what that quadrant on the plate is it is your carbohydrate source. But I want to check in and see what you all think because carbs are confusing. I talk to people about carbs and I get all kinds of answers. So who here thinks carbs are unhealthy? True. Okay. And who thinks they are healthy? Okay. Well, it's kind of a trick question because, both, right? There's some that are healthy and some that aren't. But we absolutely need carbohydrates in our diet. So when you go on a non-carb, low carb diet, you're depriving your brain of what it needs. Our brain actually requires glucose, and so if you aren't eating any carbohydrate at all, your body will break down muscle and turn it into glucose. So we need brain food. Also, obviously, we were talking about yams, potatoes, whole grains like quinoa. Those provide us a lot of nutrients, minerals, fiber, important nutrients that we need. So on that healthy kitchen checklist, all of these will be included and more with some suggestions. These are things you might want to keep stocked in your cupboard. Oatmeal, quinoa, whole grain crackers, pasta, breads. Those are all great options. Starchy vegetables, yams, potatoes, corn. And whole grain, don't be confused by multigrain. That can be somewhat misleading because multigrain means many grains, but it doesn't necessarily mean whole grain. So you want to pick products that actually have whole as the first word on the ingredient list. And then our favorite friends, the foods we have a lot of in society today, candies, cakes, sodas. We know those are not as healthy. That's kind of obvious. But we still like these foods, and they do have a place in your diet. I like to often tell people, think of food kind of like 80-20. 80% of the time, choose the healthy options when you can. Make that a priority. But 20% of the time, give yourself a treat. Because if you completely deprive yourself of all of these things, you're going to end up feeling deprived and possibly overeating. I have heard of that happening. So I have a little tip here on, this is an interesting tip. Anybody here have a sweet tooth? I have a big sweet tooth. So this quarter of the plate, these grains and starches and carbs, actually can help with carbohydrate cravings. Because what you do when you consistently eat a small amount of healthy carbohydrates at every meal, you're consistently giving your body the glucose it needs. It also helps to balance out some chemicals in your brain. Serotonin, which is something that affects carbohydrate cravings, can get balanced. It also reduces a chemical called neuropeptide Y, which your brain actually pumps out if you don't eat enough carbohydrates. Makes you crave carbs. So those days where you've gone all day without eating, you had coffee in the morning and you skipped lunch and you get home and you wonder why you want to rip the cupboard off the wall. That's why. Your brain's actually pumping out a chemical because your brain needs glucose. So following that plate will help. And I want to circle back to whole grains just really quickly because I think this is an important point. A lot of times people don't understand why we're always pushing whole grains versus refined grains. Well, whole grains, when we refine a grain, we basically take 2/3 of the grain and get rid of it and leave the starchy, soft part that doesn't have a lot of nutrition. And then we get these nice white, fluffy, refined flours we make pastries and breads out of. But we lose a lot of nutrients. And in our infinite wisdom, food manufacturers then go back and try to add nutrients back, but you don't ever get back all of what you've added. And this is a really great example. Magnesium is a really important nutrient. And so if you look, you can see the difference between a whole grain bread and a white bread and brown rice and white rice. There's more than 3 times the amount of magnesium in a serving. And that's important because, okay, listen to this. Salt, coffee, alcohol, stress, all of those deplete magnesium. And I don't know about you, but that's pretty much everybody I know nowadays. Chronically stressed, drinking more than they used to, drinking coffee to get going, salt in all our foods. So by choosing whole grains, it's a simple thing you can do every day to help support your body. Okay, so now for the big part of the plate. Half the plate devoted to fruits and vegetables. Who here eats half of their plate in fruits and vegetables right now? Pretty close? Okay, you guys deserve an honor, a medal, an award. That's fantastic. I talk to a lot of people. I look at a lot of food diaries, and I'd say 75% of them are almost completely void of a vegetable. I think it's interesting when you write it down, because even when I write it down, I look and think, oh my gosh, where are my vegetables? I got to eat my vegetables. There is a reason in their infinite wisdom when they put this plate together. Fruits and vegetables are loaded with nutrients. They're loaded with fiber, all of these things that help you feel full longer, like water and fiber. They're really high volume foods, but they're very low calorie. And so here's a comparison. What they do is they crowd out a lot of the higher calorie foods on your plate. So this is a cup of, it's 2 cups, I lied. It's 2 cups of broccoli and carrots, okay? It's a big cup. So that's about 90 to 100 calories in that bag full of fruits and vegetables. Here's 3/4 of an ounce of cheese. That's about 100 calories. So you can imagine if you fill up half your plate with these versus this, you're going to have a lot of calories. And so that's kind of the concept of, if you've ever heard of volumetrics, there's a book called Volumetrics. That's the concept behind that diet, is you add a lot of volume to your foods. You add fiber, water, and that helps you to feel full longer, gives you lots of nutrients, and can really help you feel full. And they do add flavor and crunch and color to your foods. But you know, this takes a real commitment. This takes work. This takes an intention. Like, you have to kind of sit down and think, okay, where is the vegetable on my plate? It does take a commitment. I don't think people naturally, if you go to a restaurant, you order a meal, you get like 3 green beans and a carrot. They aren't loading us up with vegetables, so that's a really important one. And I like to point out the non-starchy vegetables, which there was a handout on, because those are practically calorie-free. So go crazy on the non-starchy vegetables. Those are the carrots, tomatoes, broccoli, cauliflower, cucumbers, greens. They can really fill up your plate without a lot of extra calories. And these are some of the superstars. All fruits and vegetables are good for you, but these are some superstar veggies. The dark leafy greens, spinach, kale. We hear all about kale, but all the dark leafy greens are great. Swiss chard, I prefer Swiss chard to kale personally. The bright orange, pumpkin, sweet potatoes, carrots, those are all loaded with more nutrients. When you look at the nutrient per bite, these guys are loaded. So broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, cabbage, bell peppers, tomatoes, those are all easily accessible. There's nothing particularly special about them except that they're loaded with nutrition. So try to fit some of those into your plate every day. And this is a question I get a lot, so I thought I'd include it. Well, how do you get vegetables at breakfast? I had a veggie scramble this morning. You can scramble in spinach and zucchini and tomatoes. Those are season's coming for that. You're going to have a garden full of zucchini. That's a good use for it in your eggs in the morning. Breakfast burritos, where you add in some black beans and some spinach, maybe some salsa, tomatoes, a nice slice of avocado, and you've got that cooked in with some eggs. You've got a great breakfast. Use a whole grain wrap. Some people blend up smoothies with spinach or kale. Anybody in here tried that? Okay. And so I would love to hear what you think. I have not tried it, and I've had very mixed feedback. You either love it or you hate it. What are your thoughts?
You need a burly blender.
What?
You need a burly blender.
You need a burly blender because it's pretty hard to blend up kale. Yeah.
Spinach is a good one.
Spinach
You don't
works
even
good?
notice except for the color.
Okay. And what do you put in with it?
Berries and yogurt and just the kitchen sink, whatever.
Whatever's in. Okay.
It's a way to get that extra vegetables because it is hard to.
Yeah. Okay. And so spinach works better than kale, maybe.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Cucumbers.
I will say that I do the same thing that Jackie just said, and because of the color, a little bit of spinach makes the color, instead of this great berry red blue, makes it a little bit off, and my daughter will detect the color, but she wouldn't really detect the taste so much, because you don't taste it that much. The
I
color's a
see.
little off, even with a little bit of spinach.
Okay.
But, and a good blender, like she said, is key.
A good blender, and if you're trying to hide it from someone, it won't work because it's going to turn it a terrible color.
Maybe you could peel the cucumber and get most of it in there without getting the green color. I don't know.
Okay. So add to a cucumber. That's a good idea.
But peeled, which kind of.
You're right. Those are lighter in color. Okay. Okay.
Celery's not a good one to put on the blender. Thick and straight.
Okay. So noted. That's good advice. Okay. And some other quick ways to get in your veggies. I like to do on the weekends, cook up a big pot of a vegetable soup that's just all vegetables, and then freeze them individually, and you can grab them and throw them in your lunch bag for lunch to go with whatever else you're having, or you can pull them out at dinner. Salad as an entree, that's really not very clever, but that's a common one. If you eat frozen entrees, you can bring also additional frozen veggies in another baggie and add those in to give your meal some more bulk. It'll help you feel full longer. It'll feel like you're eating more. Roasted veggies is one of my favorite. You get the caramelized sweet flavor of the onions and whatever you put in, yams. That's a good way to get in your veggies. Any other ideas here that you guys are doing now to get in extra veggies that you just are dying to share?
Back to the vegetable smoothie.
Yeah.
I have a really nice blender, it's big, and I make it full once a week, and then I just put it in a quart jar in the fridge, and I can just take, and it's there, so I can take a cup each morning, and I've got my veggies, and I do use kale, lots of kale, I grow it.
Okay.
And spinach and parsley and celery, carrots, and then fruit too, to sweeten it up.
Okay, so you have a good recipe. And that's smart because then you have to clean the blender once. And that's hard.
Not much, I mean, I do stir it up a bit.
Okay, so make a great big once a week.
Yeah. I put oranges and lemons to give it, and then maybe that helps keep the color. I love the color, and I'm not trying to hide it from anyone, 'cause it's just for me, so.
Okay.
So it is bright green.
Kale, oranges, lemon. What else do you put in there?
Spinach.
Spinach,
Sometimes a beet.
A beet?
sometimes,
Oh, okay. Yum.
Carrots.
carrots.
Yeah.
That sounds like a super smoothie. Yeah,
So the antioxidants in all those vegetables are amazing.
that's fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, and finally on that graphic, the choose my food, now I don't even remember the name of it, that's terrible. There's a little cup up at the top that would suggest a glass of milk with every meal. I don't really perceive that that's what they mean by that. I think what they're trying to point out is to aim at getting some calcium 3 times a day, get 3 good servings of calcium, and that may be in some different forms. There's cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, milk, but there's also non-dairy for the folks who don't eat dairy. You know, these milks that are like almond milk, rice milk. Just be sure you're choosing one that's fortified. So read the nutrition label and make sure it has some calcium in it. 200 to 400 milligrams per cup would be about right.
The kale and the other greens too are high in calcium.
They are high in calcium. They aren't as well absorbed, but they are high in calcium.
I thought combining them with citrus made them easier to absorb. Is that true, or is that
I actually haven't heard that, so I don't know. That's a good. Iron gets absorbed better
Oh,
with
maybe that's-
citrus.
I think that was what was in my red.
Okay.
In my-
Yeah.
Could you just repeat the questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I don't remember what the question was. One question was if you combined citrus with greens, if that helped to absorb the calcium. And I don't know if that's true. I know that that's true of iron. And then also, she was pointing out that the greens are high in calcium. They're just not as well absorbed.
Is there any other way besides the sun to get vitamin D, and besides fortified in milk or in a dairy?
In a
Is there-
supplement. Mostly sunshine is, you know, when we can get it, like today, get lots of vitamin D, fortified foods.
But dairy-
Eggs have a
dairy-
little bit, you know, there's not a lot of vitamin D in our foods. Dairy is the best source.
Cod liver oil.
Cod liver oil. I don't ever think of that. You are a great, you bet you put that in your smoothie, don't you? Okay, that was a good question. Okay, and finally, the Choose My Plate does not show oils. Like the pyramid used to have a slice of talking about fats and oils. And that's because we don't eat fats and oils. We cook with them and we top our foods with them. So I'd like to just point out to, you know, be cognizant of the fats that you're choosing, because we now know, you know, research does not really support a non-fat diet. Our body needs fat. Every cell of our body is made up of fat, but we still want to eat not a lot of it. You know, I usually tell people about 30% of your calories from fat. But you do need them for every cell. But be aware that fat has twice as many calories as protein and carbs, so sparingly. And when you choose your fats, choose things like peanut butter, almonds, walnuts, soybean oil, avocados, olives. Those are all the heart-healthy fats. We know that those do a lot of good things in our bodies. We also know that foods with the saturated fats and the trans fats are the fats that cause the clogged arteries, the high cholesterol, and give us cardiac problems down the road. Anything with partially hydrogenated means it's trans fat, just put it back. Don't even eat it. Do not buy it. Don't vote with your dollar. Those should be going away. Those are kind of getting worked out of the food system completely. I went backwards. You have a question on the dairy?
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I've heard recently that they did a study, and people who drank non-fat milk or low-fat milk or ate low-fat yogurt actually were not skinnier or healthier than the people who ate the high fats. They thought there was something in the full fat that was really good for you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Have you heard that?
I haven't heard about that study. So what she was saying was that there's a study that they looked at people who ate low-fat, non-fat dairy versus high-fat dairy, and there really wasn't a difference.
Well, actually, they said that the people that ate the whole milk products were skinnier
Skinnier.
than people
Well, that's interesting. Maybe they feel more satisfied and fuller. The only thing I would worry about with that is if they looked at cardiac risk, because there's a lot of saturated fat in the full fat products, which can lead to hardening of the arteries.
I've compared like fat-free or low-fat versus like just the regular amount of fat, and it seems like I always see more sugar in the low-fat. So is that?
In dairy products specifically, or?
That's what's first coming to mind, yeah.
That has been a trend. When low fat was really hot, I don't think it's as hot now, what they did was they replaced fat with sugar, and that's not a good trade-off, right?
Is that still happening? Is that not still happening?
If you buy a non-fat ice cream or non-fat cookies, low-fat cookies, they're going to be loaded with sugar, yeah.
Oh, I wasn't thinking of that type of product.
Like-
I was thinking of like milk,
Milk.
skim versus whole.
Yeah, no, there shouldn't be added sugar in plain milk that I
But
would,
if you just compare like just the sugar
Oh,
content,
oh,
not,
I got it.
not added sugar.
I got it, okay.
Yeah.
So the difference is you have a whole, an amount of calories, and there's a percentage of the different nutrients. So if you take out the fat, there's going to be more sugar because milk is made up of sugar, fat, and protein. The lactose is the sugar part. So it is higher in natural lactose sugar.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So what does that do for you if you're lactose intolerant?
What is,
Well, you're saying you get more sugar, which is what causes your
Yeah.
lactose or something?
lactose intolerant? Well, if you're lactose intolerant, you're probably using very small amounts of milk. Everybody's different. Some people can tolerate half a cup of milk. Some people can't tolerate much at all. But I don't know if the difference between the fat would make much of a difference in say, a half a cup of milk, the fat-sugar ratio. Am I answering your question?
I'm not sure. To be honest with you.
Okay,
But okay,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so that's the run-through on the choosemyplate.gov. You know, the bottom line on that really is that balance is really powerful. To get the right amount of protein, carb, fat, fiber in your meal will really help. I like to use my hands on this. So you can imagine if you have a cup of coffee and a donut. Here goes your blood sugar. It spikes up, and then it drops because your insulin has to spike up to meet the high glucose levels. So an hour later, your glucose is bottomed out, you're tired after you had your coffee and your donut, but your insulin's still high, so you're hungry. And so when you eat some protein and some healthy carbs, some fruits and some vegetables and some calcium, you have more of like a rolling wheat field blood glucose reaction, and that's naturally how our insulin levels work. And so you have more energy. You feel full longer. You might be able to resist the 10 a.m. donuts that your colleagues bring in because you actually are satisfied. You're saying no? No. You have a chance at least. Okay. So now to the fun stuff, the tips for a healthy kitchen. So in the handouts, again, these, use that checklist to go through your kitchen and give yourself a score and see how you're doing. If you have family members who want to have cookies and such in the house, I realize we all have to work together and live as one in a household, but you can do a few things. You can make sure that the healthy food is front and center in the fridge, in the cabinets, because the research does show that we are more likely to eat the first thing we see. So if you put the Cheetos up in the corner behind the big flour sack so that it's hard to get to and it's not in front of your face, you're more likely going to choose the pretzels that are up in front. And the recipes that we provided are all tried and true Pacific Source recipes. Actually, our employees put most of these together in a contest, a healthy eating contest, and they were judged and taste tested. And these, I love all of these because they are doable. Even that crock pot chili, you don't need a crock pot. I cooked it in a regular pan. It tastes really good, and it's very low sodium, which is unusual for a chili. These are doable. Really, I kind of read recipes. I know I'm a dietitian, but I'm really not a cook. I read recipes, and you get these big, long ones, and it's like, I feel like I've just read a science fiction novel, and I think that's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. I've done all of these. They're easy, healthy, tasty. I think you'll enjoy some of them. And that vegetable slaw with peanut dressing is loaded with kale. You'll have your family eating kale. I've heard that children even ask for seconds of that salad. So, okay, so some tips. When you go grocery shopping and you fill up your cart and you buy all of those healthy fruits and vegetables, do not go home and put it in the drawer in the bottom of the refrigerator. Because what happens? It rots, you forget about it. Right, exactly. I've had so many people say they quit buying them because they feel guilty for throwing away vegetables. So, you know what, just build in 20 minutes into the chore of grocery shopping. Build in 20 minutes that when you get home, you're gonna chop, prep, wash, whatever you have to do, get those things in the fridge, front and center in that spot where you're gonna see them. You really will eat them. I say that surprisingly because I do too. If I do that, if I take the time, I eat them. They're there. I want them. It's just that I'm not going to do it later in the week when you're running, you're working long hours, you're getting home late, you're running kids to games. It's not going to happen. So, you know, make it a priority and build that into your grocery day. Just that's part of the process.
So can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
'Cause I think that's one of my challenging issues, I guess, is that I thought when you washed a vegetable that it's kind of accelerates, or maybe this is just my observation, that accelerates expiration, yeah, so that
Expiration.
it'll stay in the fridge for a few days and then it kind of gets slimy. So what's the best way to
Okay.
wash and store them?
Well,
Maybe
there-
air or no air?
That's a good question. So she's asking what's the best way to wash and store the vegetables, and that is a really good question. I actually spent a lot of time trying to write an article about that, and I never finished it because they are all different, and it has to do with the different levels of certain sugars in different foods. So it's kind of it's what works for you. Like jicama, I love jicama, but I have to go home and I have to chop it and prepare it right then. And 3 or 4 days later, it gets kind of white and dry and funny. So I have to eat that first. But yeah, there's not a good answer. That's a good question, and I don't know what the answer is.
Tupperware makes these containers that are vented, and on the side are these little bins. And then it shows every kind of fruit and vegetable, and it tells you whether to have both bins open, both bins closed, one open, one closed. And it prolongs like berries.
Oh, wow.
Everything so much longer than what you can normally keep.
Okay, that's a great tip. So if you didn't hear what she said, Tupperware makes a dish.
Plastic. And I ended up giving mine to my daughter, so now I need.
Oh,
one.
no.
But really, they work wonderfully.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so Tupperware makes a vented dish that tells you how much oxygen to let in. That's great. Thank you. Good question. Okay, and here's just a little research. You've all heard use smaller plates. I'm sure that's nothing new, but there is actually research that proves that if you use these smaller 10-inch plates and you have contrast to your meal, so if you're having scrambled eggs, you don't use a yellow plate, you would use blue or green, something that contrasts with the color, you will eat 18 to 22% less than if you have the bigger plates. It's just a human psychology fact. And of course, just this idea of keeping in eyes view what you want to eat. So on the counter, have your fresh fruit if that's what you want the family to be eating, but make sure that the cookies and all the other goodies are kind of hidden and tucked away so that that's the first thing we see in the kitchen. And this is a tip that I use, although you can buy these now too. I will pre-cook brown rice on the weekends and then individually freeze them so I can have those for grab and go lunches. You can also buy these now. Trader Joe's has quinoa, brown rice, mixed grains, all in the freezer section, pre-cooked. You throw them in the microwave for 3 minutes, you got your grain. Because brown rice takes like 45 or 50 minutes to cook, and I don't think most people won't do that on a weeknight when you're in a hurry. Yeah.
Is there a difference in the nutrients between the regular long cooked brown rice versus the quick cook?
That's a good question. So is there a difference in the nutrition between the long cooking and the quick cooking brown rice? I don't know the exact answer for that. My suspicion is there wouldn't be much, except that It's going to be somehow, it's kind of like the difference between steel cut oats versus rolled oats. When you look at the nutrition facts, the protein, calories, fat, that's all the same. What they say the difference is that steel cut oats are a little less processed. So they're a little lower on that glycemic index, meaning that they take longer for your stomach to break down, takes longer to get into your bloodstream, so you don't have as much of an increase in your blood sugar. So that, I would suspect, would be the same with the different cooking times on the rice. Cooking meats, that's a challenge during the week. So if you are going to cook, you have a nice dinner planned, think ahead of what you could save for later in the week. I tend to cook up large batches of chicken cutlets. I like Trader Joe's. They have pre-frozen chicken cutlets that are skinless, and those are so handy. You can pull those out, cook up a bunch, and then freeze them. You can pull those out and add them to soups, add them to salad. Great quick lunches and dinners on the go, sandwiches. We often don't think about hard-boiled eggs, but that's actually a really easy snack to have as a grab and go. If you don't have time in the morning to cook, you can grab a hard-boiled egg and take that for lunch or for breakfast at your desk. Any other ideas of how you pre-cook meats or grab and go snacks that you find really handy?
I'll just say that, they also now, I can't remember which company it is, but they have pre-cooked beans and lentils.
Okay.
So, I know lentils don't take all that long to cook, but it's still, if you're trying to make a real quick soup or something of the sort.
Absolutely.
It's nice to have they're in the frozen section.
Pre-cooked, and they're plain beans and plain lentils. Okay, yeah, that's great. That's the way of the world now. Is everything that takes extra time is hard on us because we are time challenged. Sugar, gosh, we eat too much sugar. Everybody knows that. America eats a lot of sugar. It's been about 5 years ago, the American Heart Association actually made recommendations on how much sugar we should eat, which is interesting because it kind of surprised people back when it happened, because we always think of the fats that we eat and how that affects your heart, but not necessarily how sugar affects your heart. And that's a whole new area of research right now is, how is sugar and what we eat affecting our cholesterol levels? We know that too much sugar causes high triglycerides. So their recommendation is 100 to 150 calories a day of added sugar. So to put that in context, a 12-ounce soda is about 130 calories of added sugar. So there's not really a lot of room for extra sweets when you start looking at the granola bars and our yogurts and ketchup and tomato sauces. There's sugar added into a lot of the things that we eat. So these are just some interesting ways that I've heard from others that they've tried to reduce sugar. So cinnamon and vanilla are both sweeteners without having calories or sugar. So adding cinnamon to your coffee grounds before you brew it can be an interesting flavor. You can use a cinnamon stick with teas instead of sweeteners. I like peppermint tea with green tea to counteract kind of that bitter. Then I don't need a sweetener with it. You can add cinnamon to toast, applesauce, oatmeals. Adding vanilla and cinnamon to oatmeal really sweetens it up a lot without adding any sugar. In smoothies, you can use the ripe bananas that you're going to throw away. Just peel those, cut them up, throw them in the freezer, and use those for smoothies because they're really sweet when they get overly ripe. That's all the sugars. They make a great natural sweetener. And for this summer, on a hot day like today, rather than getting a Diet Coke or a regular Coke, you can try fruit-infused water. If you've ever gone to a nice hotel, they'll have a big pitcher of icy cold water with all these beautiful fruits and strawberries and kiwi floating in it. You can do that at home. Just cut up a couple cups of water and put it in a pitcher and fill it up and put it in your fridge. Don't keep them for more than about 3 days, though, because they do start to go bad, so you want to refresh. But that is a great refreshing drink for the summer.
And you feel fancy.
And you feel fancy, yes. You have to bring out your fine crystal for the infused water. And then salt and fat. So sugar, salt, and fat are the three that we're trying to reduce a little bit in our diets. These are just ideas that others have shared with me that I thought I'd pass on to you because I think they're great ideas. You know, mashed potatoes, we load those up with butter and cream and make them really gooey and good. But you can actually make pretty good mashed potatoes with chicken broth and garlic salt or garlic powder. Either of those actually make a nice mashed potato. Mixing curry powder with Greek yogurt in place of mayonnaise. You could use that in a pita with some roasted peppers and some other veggies and some avocado and turkey. You have a great sandwich. Instead of salt, try adding some oregano or Italian seasoning to your scrambled eggs. It's an easy substitution. It tastes pretty good. If you love bacon, if you cook with bacon, a lot of times yes, we like the fat from bacon, so maybe you don't want to eliminate it completely, but a lot of times we're trying to get that smoky flavor. So experiment with these liquid smokes. I don't know if any of you have seen those or tried those. Those add a nice flavor. I love smoked paprika. That adds a nice flavor, so you can kind of replace some of the bacon with some smoke flavor. And this is one of my favorite tips because it's a heart-healthy swap. So with your Mexican dishes and your Spanish dishes, try replacing cheese and sour cream with a guacamole. I love guacamole. And you know, you still are getting some fat, but you're getting the heart-healthy fat. So you're swapping out those saturated fats with the heart-healthy monounsaturated fat. And that actually, if you were to switch out all of your cheese with guacamole without eating more guacamole, you can lower your cholesterol levels. Okay, question.
Have you tried, we use nutritional yeast a lot instead of cheese.
Okay.
Because it's got somewhat of a cheese flavor, but it's got all the B12 and all the things.
Right.
It's not quite the same, but.
It's not the same, is it? I have tried it. It's not the same. It's
Instead of cheese.
yeah. That's a good idea. So you can replace cheese if you're wanting a cheese-like flavor. Try nutritional yeast. Vegans use that a lot to get the B12 that they don't get without any kind of animal foods. Doesn't taste the same, but it can add kind of a cheesy flavor, so you can experiment with that.
Or you can reduce the amount of cheese.
Right. Reduce some of the cheese and add some of the nutritional yeast. That's perfect because then you get a little bit of both.
Talking about Greek yogurt, I actually have replaced all my pretty much mayonnaise and sour cream with whole milk Greek yogurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It works in everything like you would sour cream. And maybe if you want to try it, you can kind of mix like half mayonnaise and half Greek yogurt.
Yes. Yeah, so she's been using Greek yogurt in place of mayonnaise. And you'll notice in the basil and cilantro dressings, those are delicious, by the way. That's what they've done is they've put a little bit of mayonnaise in with some of the non-fat Greek yogurt to kind of give the texture, and then you have the flavor of lime and cilantro, and it's really good. Thank you.
How does the Greek yogurt work heated up?
Yeah, it's a little difficult heating it. You have to experiment with it because it can, can't think of the word, curdle, thank you. I'm like, rhymes with girdle, curdle, yeah, and then it's not very good. Were you cringing at the curdle or the girdle? Or both? Okay, now it's time for show and tell. So some of my favorite gadgets. Okay, if you don't have, apparently we all need to get the Tupperware dish with the vents that shows us how to, I'm going to get one. That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. These are my favorite dishes in the whole world. These are Pyrex glass dishes, and they have lids. They can go from freezer to oven to microwave. I love these. I take my lunch in this thing probably 4 out of 5 days a week because you can do hot foods, cold foods. Awesome. And this is like what you would put the soup in. You cook that big pot of soup, you put it in this, you stick it in the freezer, you got to grab and go. You can toss it in the microwave at work. These are probably my favorite kitchen dish.
Can I ask you a question about the microwave?
Yeah,
You put it in the microwave, do you put it in with that lid loose on it?
I do.
Oh, you do?
I do. I wouldn't put it in the oven with the lid. But the microwave I do, yeah, to keep it from splashing all over the microwave, and it doesn't melt. It works. Okay. And we were talking about blenders. This might not work with a kale smoothie, I don't know. But these things are fantastic. These are the stick blenders, so you can make smoothies. They come with a big plastic cup. You can literally just make your smoothie in, like, I don't know, 20 seconds. If you cook soups and you want to have a pureed soup, you just put this into the pan and you can blender your soup that way. Salad dressings, it emulsifies really well. And the good news about this is when you're done, this is what you wash. So it's so easy because cleaning the blender is hard work. You have to make a week's worth to make that worthwhile. And then I, of course, can't get it to work right. The ceramic pans, these are the new nonstick pans, replacing Teflon, which is good because Teflon's going away anyway. It's not that great for us. You don't want to, if you have Teflon, don't cook on high heats. Don't cook your foods on high heats. So the lower heats are okay, but higher heats, it can kind of impart some of the chemicals in it. I got this because it went up to 550 degrees. So this is how I can cook chicken the way I like it, which is seared for about 90 seconds. So you put it on about medium-high heat on stovetop, sear it for 90 seconds on each side so it gets that dark, crispy, caramelized, yummy, and then you throw it in the preheated oven. The whole pan goes in the oven, and you finish it that way. Just have to resist the temptation of grabbing the handle in the oven because that will hurt. And then my meat thermometer. This is a digital meat thermometer. I love this thing. This is how I check when my chicken's done so that I don't have dry, stringy chicken. This is kind of a cool one because it's like a ½ inch to I think that's about a ½ inch. A lot of meat thermometers you have to go in pretty deep to check the temperature of your meat. So this is a digital meat thermometer that works with thin pieces of meat, and that's the way I always know that it's cooked enough so that no one's going to get food poisoning, and that it's not going to be dry and stringy. I also just recently found, but I didn't bring with me, these cool little salad dressing containers that they're plastic. I can't even explain it. Any gadgets that you guys know of that you love and want to share?
Kind of what you were just describing. I don't know if it's the same thing. It's by Glad, but they're just little plastic. That's all there. Cups
Little plastic cups
with a blue lid.
with a blue lid.
I
It might
can
be.
put like, well, baby food is why I originally got them, but a hard-boiled egg fits in there, and then you can just like grab it.
Okay.
Or just a bit of raspberries
It's a cup with a blue lid. Okay. Grab and go. Okay, I've lost the... I threatened that I might fall over this. It's possible. Okay, and then finally on the handouts there's a resources page. And I just wanted you guys to know that this is out there. So the Choose My Plate folks that put together that nice resource have put together a 7-day sample meal planner. So it can give you ideas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you're looking for new, fresh ideas. It's available. The link is included on the resources handout. And meal planning, I provided you with an old school version of a hand 7-day meal planner. You know, the people I talk to that actually sit down and plan out their menu for the week say it's a huge time saver. It saves money, but it's more of a stress reducer on whoever is the cook of the family, because you are running around during the week, you get busy, and then there's this horrible evening crisis every night about what's for dinner, what I'm going to make, and then you end up doing fast food because you're exhausted. If you've got something planned out and you know it's like a 20-minute meal and you have the ingredients because you shopped for it, because you did your plan before you shopped, it's so much less stress in your evening. If you're technology bent, this pepperplate.com is pretty neat. It's free, and you can upload recipes, you can add recipes, you can create your own menus, you can create a meal planner and a grocery list all within the software. So if you're technology bent, check that one out. That's free. I've used the 6 o'clock scramble. I'm not using it now, just because it gives you a nightly menu for a family of 4. and I'm just cooking for myself, so that I just had too much food coming at me. But it's only like $7 a month, I think, for the most expensive fee. But what's nice is they do send you a weekly dinner menu with a grocery list. They give the nutrition facts, they give tips and hints that are really neat. And you can also create your own with a huge recipe database. They have options where you can select a gluten-free, dairy-free, vegetarian, weight loss. So it's a pretty nice resource as well. There's a lot of resources out there. Anybody have something they use now for meal planning that's not up here? Okay. I know, it's work to do meal planning. But I don't always do it either. The people that do it consistently say it's a lifesaver. So that's pretty much it. Plan ahead, prepare, stock your kitchen with the healthy choices. 80% of the time, choose those, and give yourself that treat 20% of the time. Try new recipes. I also included a couple of websites, cookinglight.com, eatingwell.com. They have great healthy recipes that are pretty simple and tasty. And then, again, just encouraging you to follow that balance of the protein, carb, fat, and fiber in a meal will really help you feel more energetic, reduce cravings, resist the 10 o'clock donut. But really, here's my challenge to you, because I bet a lot of this was review. I've been working with people for quite a while, and I know most people know what the healthy choices are and what to do. The reality is, life is busy, and applying some of these things are difficult. So my challenge to you is pick one thing that resonated with you in the last hour. Before you leave, write it down somewhere and commit to trying it this week and actually take action, because that's how you create new habits, is you actually just experiment with it and try it and commit to doing it. Questions?